Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. So we continue in our reading of the book Healthy Relationships, and we're still in the section that's dealing with conflict resolution. There's only a little bit left of that section, and we'll finish that off today. And we said that we were going to hold off going into chapter 3, which was accepting and sharing opinions, until we finish that section. Also today, we're going to also start chapter 3, accepting and sharing opinions. So we finish off the section of dealing with conflict. And so there comes a point in a relationship, and she says, and we mentioned that the author is a woman. So the author is coming from a woman's perspective on some issues. And last time she mentioned, sorry to point fingers, but women do tend to bring up things quite unrelated to an argument, making it irrelevant. And I stated that the author is a woman so that women don't get offended and think that that's coming from the perspective of a man. And then we get into this whole argument between males and females that's so dominant in today's time. So there's things that we all do, and maybe we can say that men do the same thing, but she brought that up as something that she considered that women do. That's not the bias of a man. But today's section is dealing with the point of the conflict in which people don't want to continue to fight. And she says that people, they begin to fight in a relationship, they begin to argue, but the goal is not necessarily to keep that going. They want it to end as soon as possible. So then now she's coming to the point of how is it that we settle the argument, or how is it that we can approach to begin to calm things down. So she talks about the issue of restoring balance in the relationship. And settling an argument is not necessarily going to restore the balance in the relationship if there's issues that still have to be addressed, but what it does is it calms down the moment. And we started off with this reflection, that is continuous on a weekly basis now, with the section that talks about learning how to listen to each other, right? Learning how to listen to each other. And so settling an argument is not necessarily going to resolve everything in the relationship. Usually when arguments take place, it's the same thing when people go through a fitna in their lives. Today I was counseling someone, and they were going through a particular hardship with one of their family members. And then they brought up what happened with another family member, and they brought up what happened with a loved one that they have. And so sometimes when we're going through issues, we compound the issue. And it's the same thing in arguments. Sometimes when we're arguing with a person that's dear to us, we not only maybe feel violated, but we also begin to think about what the person said yesterday and what they said 2 years ago. And we begin to think that what is something that's continuous, is something that never ends. And so we have to realize that when we're looking to settle the argument, we're trying to restore the balance of the moment. And if we actually really want to restore balance in the relationship, it's different than restoring balance in the moment. She says how to restore balance in a relationship, but that's not going to happen unless we get to the underlying issues, the real issues of what causes the conflict in the relationship. Before going into that, I wanted to talk about the spirit of Islamic scholarship and how it is that conflicts were looked at by some of the great scholars. There's something that's attributed to Imam al-Shafi'i. And supposedly there was an argument between him and Yunus Abdulillah. And I'm sorry, Abdul Ala. Is always when you deal with transliteration, there's confusion that comes up with pronouncing names. Him and Yunus is attributed to Imam al-Shafi'i, but the statements are pretty sound that we find in it. He says, "Oh Yunus, there's 100 hundreds of issues that unite us, and only one issue that divided us. Don't try to be triumphant in all differences. Sometimes winning hearts is more important than winning in the situation. Don't destroy or demolish bridges you built and crossed, for you may need them again one day for your return. Always hate what is wrong, but don't hate the one who errs or who made the mistake. Hate sin with all your heart, but forgive and have mercy on the person who committed the sin. Criticize speech, but respect the speaker. Our job is to wipe out the disease, not the patient. And we find that this is a dialogue, or this is a response that Imam Shafi'i gave Yunus Abdul Ala, and this is an issue that we have that we don't implement, right? Don't try to be dominant when you fall into a situation in which there's conflict. That's not the goal. The goal is not for you to win the argument and prove the point. And unfortunately, this is something that doesn't only go on in husband-wife dynamics. It's something that even goes on amongst the Muslims in general. Is the goal the truth? Is the goal to bring about the better in the situation? Is the goal to correct the situation? Or is the goal to prove yourself to be the one? Now, that's a different issue. If the goal is to prove yourself to be the one that has the truth and the other person is wrong, then what about if there's a point that you made that's wrong and the other person is right in that point, even though in the majority of what you said you're correct? Then that means you're not looking after the truth. That's clear, no? That's clear, Muhammad? That's clear? That point is clear? There's some, when we do these online things, it's very difficult to always, give feedback. So I appreciate the feedback from you, brothers. So that's the first thing, is that especially when we start talking about the husband-wife dynamic, this is not about winning the argument. It's not about being in competition with each other, for goodness sake. Wallahi, that hurts. It hurts my heart to even think about it, because we don't realize that the core of the ummah is the family. And when the family is not intact, then that means that we're not intact as an ummah. That means that we're not intact. And I'll say that again, that the core of the ummah is the family. And when the family is not healthy, when the family is not intact, the ummah is not intact. There's not going to be any ummah without the stability and the restoration of the family. So the arkan al-usra, the pillars of the family, is the husband and the wife. الزوج والزوجة. And we have to realize that the husband and the wife, they're modeling what Islam means. They're modeling what it means to live life. They're modeling what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a couple, what it means to be a team, what it means to be organized for the children, what it means to be good Muslims, what it means to deal with emotions, what it means to decision make, how to argue. Now, all arguments are bad. And we mentioned that some arguments need to be had. So firstly, we want to wipe out the idea of someone having to win the argument. Too many couples, husband and wife, they're actually in competition with each other. And that's not the value that we want to have. So here he says, don't try to be triumphant in all differences. No, that sometimes, okay, in some points, if you want to compete in the argument, don't make it in things that, make it in an academic point, or make it in something that's beneficial, but not in things that are necessitated or needed in order to run the family life. There's a time when it can be open, like, you can joke and it could be like, let's see who can win this one. That's fine. But not in the essence, on the everyday basis, on every issue. You understand what I'm saying? He says here something that most of us, we miss the point. Sometimes winning hearts is more important than winning situations. That's why يعني في قضية الإصلاح we are allowed, when it comes to at times to reconciling or bettering relationships, we're allowed at times even to paint the situation maybe not how it is, with the intention of bringing about reconciliation. Sometimes, in other words, we may need to say something that may not be the exact truth to soften the heart of the other person, to bring people together. People don't like that, but that's a reality. Because of the destruction that comes about, that doesn't mean that we take that as being the core of how we speak with each other and we deal with each other, because we can make the situation worse if we're just never addressing truth, if we're never addressing what needs to be addressed. And the other person may consider us to be a liar. But there's some things that sometimes we bring into the relationship that we say that it is not about winning the heart, it's about destroying the heart. And we talked about that with some of the language that's used and so on and so forth. We begin to insult each other. We begin to mention the past. We begin to blame. That's not how we are supposed to conduct ourselves in a relationship, in an argument where we're trying to address an issue. Insulting the person, bringing up the past, bringing up other issues. Not even in the science of jarh wa ta'deel, in hadith sciences, when we're criticizing a person to see if they're worthy for us to take the knowledge of hadith from. Don't talk to me about their mom or what they did 20 years ago. You understand what I'm saying? That's not even the way of the ulama, except, we call those who decide to think that they're ulama, aghbiya. We call them aghbiya, people that are devoid of intellect in that regard. Because if we're dealing with one issue right now, that's the issue that we're dealing with. So our intellect should know we're dealing with this issue. What does it have to do that this person's mother or father or sister or brother or cousin or friend or whoever else, they're outside of the issue that we're dealing with right now? And if they're involved in the issue, we have to ask, are they involved directly or indirectly? So then that becomes another conversation. You know what I'm saying? The conversations that we have to be focused at times, especially when they're heated. But the issue he says here, we don't have to dominate. Imam Shafi'i. Winning hearts is more important than winning in the situation. And then this is most important. Don't demolish bridges you built and crossed, meaning in this case, how I interpret it. I'm not saying that he's saying this, but the meaning that I get out of it, if you went into a marriage contract, you bridge yourself and the other person in that marriage contract. So your life is rooted in that marriage contract with that person. Okay, forget the contract as the main focus. Now you're after the aqd nikah, you're living life, or you're about to have your life with that person. You're about to get to the point of the marriage contract. Didn't you open the door to see if you had enough commonality, compatibility, if there was something there in order for you to say, well, you know what, we can build a life together. So why would you destroy that? And the same thing with the married couples. If you already crossed the bridge of the marriage contract versus crossing the bridge of being strangers completely, now you're getting to know each other, you want to build the marriage. Why would you know what I'm saying? Why would you destroy that? And I'm speaking specifically here now to people that are married. Why would you destroy that which you built your life on 5 years, 20 years, 15 years, 2-3 years? For you may need these bridges, right? Again, one day for your return. And it's not only the relationship. Here we can even take the example. It's not only the relationship between husband and wife. Because in Islam, family is not just husband and wife. It's also our relationship with our children. How many times in arguments and so on and so forth they lead to divorce, and then the children are destroyed in the process. Or, our relationships with our relatives are destroyed in the process. Or our relationships with our friends that become part of our family are destroyed in the process. Right? We bring everybody in. We keep bringing people in the circle in order to win, the debate. Then he mentions the point, hate was wrong, not the person. And this happens a lot, especially we see this when people begin to differ, when there's issues, they move from hating what's wrong to hating the person. You know how they have that statement, love turns to hate. Love turns to hate, but here we're talking about loving the person, it turns to hating the person. And that is really because we're trying to resolve the issue, but we can't resolve the issue. There's a statement that is made. I want to before going into the book, I wanted to add these points from Islamic thought. So that was something from Imam Shafi'i. Hate the sin with all your heart or what the person does wrong, but forgive and have mercy, on that person. Dr. Ramadan al-Buti, rahmatullah alayhi, he says, the most serious danger lies not in two people disagreeing over a matter in which each one has led to his or her respective view by convincing evidence. If you've been led to that point by evidence, sorry, because I have to wear glasses. Right? The most serious danger lies not in two people disagreeing over a matter in which each one has been led to that point by his or her respective view based on convincing evidence. In other words, you're convinced. It's not just the issue of your opinion. You have data, you have facts, you have something to back you up. You have rational proofs. You have Quran and Sunnah, whatever may be in that regard. Differing is not the issue if what you're standing on, your position is something that's solid. The danger is that an opinion which one holds on sound thinking, it may be the truth, or it may be something that is sound, it could be acceptable, that it turned into a bigoted prejudice that takes hold of his soul. Okay, that needs a little bit of clarification. You may be right, and you may have something to support why it is you're right, not just that you feel that you're right. This stuff. But when you push that to the limit now, you understand what I'm saying? And you use you being right so that it's about you, not about the situation correcting yourself, or about good coming about, or it's not about truth, or it's not about bettering, or it's not about our unity, or it's not about our growth, or it's not about our relationship with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. It's not about our children anymore. It's not about bettering our life, but it's about me being right once again. It's about me holding the truth. Because I'll use this example. You can be a Muslim, and we believe that Islam is the haqq. But then you can be a Muslim that goes beyond the limits now. You begin to even violate the principles of Islam. Why? Because you don't even give people the chance to express themselves. Now you're going beyond the limits, and you're becoming like a dictator. There's that term in Arabic, asabi. You're just holding on to your opinion. That's it. No one can have a space with you. So he said, so here, Dr. Ramadan Buti is telling us, yes, it's possibly right, but what's your attitude? And how is it that you're using being right? The most serious danger lies not in two people disagreeing over a matter in which each one, we can simplify it, has a point, so to speak. The danger is that the opinion which you hold, which is based on some sound thinking, some proof, right? I'm embellishing what he's saying. Now you become a bigot. Now you become biased. Now you become prejudiced. Now your attitude that comes along with that is not the attitude which leaves room for mercy. It's not the attitude which leaves room for further understanding. There may be a point that you miss. There may be an error that's made, and see, we're scared sometimes to let go. So here she says, now let's go back to Rachel. She says that settling an argument is easy when both parties or both partners acknowledge the differences in opinions and are ready to address the issue decently. Decently, we can say in Islamic terms, is like justly, yani bil insaf, equity, fair. That's important. And she talks about that, comes up in the next chapter. So then, how do we restore balance? Many arguments that we have now can be said to be the result of conflicts from the past that were never addressed, issues from the past that were maybe major, some minor, and they kept accumulating along with the major issues. But she says, focus on the present. That's how we begin to restore balance. When you bring up something entirely different from what you're dealing with at the moment, you only add to the problem. And we mentioned that already. But here she uses a term which is more important. She says you add to the resentment. The feeling, that part is important. We can't escape that part in dealing with this issue. The feeling, the resentment. Because sometimes the person you may be debating with or arguing with or in a conflict with, they may say, you know what, you have a point. But the way that you say it, the way that you express it, the way that you deal with it, it makes them feel like, it makes them feel even more mad at you. And even the tone that's part of the communication, no doubt about it. The tone, the facial expressions, the facial gestures, the moment that you bring the thing up. Sometimes somebody can bring up something that's true, that's right, but it's not the right time and place. It makes it what? It makes it seem as though the person is not what? Considerate. Feelings are important. So here, she said, don't bring up something from the past that has no relationship to the moment that you're dealing with, the situation that you're dealing with in the moment. Let me add to the resentment that both of you have. Avoid doing that, she said. Focus on the current issue only. And so there's something called parsing, or in other terms, you chop things up. If you have conflict or you have problems or if you have issues, this is important for our emotional well-being, especially in this time period. If you have, let's say, 3 different problems that are going on in your life running at the same time, you have to learn that in the moment, which problem am I dealing with? Am I dealing with this problem, problem A? Am I dealing with problem B? Or am I dealing with problem C? If you're trying to deal with A, B, and C all at one time, at the same time, yeah. And this is the conversation that some of us are having on a regular basis. El-infijar. You explode. And we said that explosion can be internal or external. If it's internal, you can shut down and become majorly depressed. If it's external, it can turn into domestic violence or it can turn into something else. Like maybe suicidal ideation, maybe trying to take your life. And that's similar to the depression itself. But it's not just something that you're containing within yourself. It's something now you're beginning to harm yourself in a violent way. And that's why I said it in that way. And a lot of people are suffering from that. That's why it's important to learn how to deal with emotion. Right? So take each thing in its time and its place. Other thing, which is not mentioned right now in this book, is look at the good. That's a Quranic principle. To look at the good, because it may be that which you hate may be good for you. And one small thing that you don't like about the person, right, in that situation, you have to remember the good. As long as there's no physical violence and so on and so forth, you know what I'm saying? We ask people to do that. And she talks about, Muhammad, you brought up the issue of the tone and the pitch. She said the reason you have to be extra special with the tone and the pitch of your voice is that sometimes we don't even realize that we are yelling unless the other person points it out. Right. But that she brings that up in the comment sections. Right now, she's dealing with be careful about continuously bringing up the past. Don't continuously bring up the past in an argument if it's not related to the moment, because that only creates a situation which is more and more problematic. Right? That's an issue. The other thing that she mentions, which is very important, is to make sure, and this is something, there's some brothers that have this issue, but I see it a lot in sisters and women. And that is that they don't defend themselves. They don't defend themselves. And how do you defend yourself? This is not an issue of you going back and forth, but you have to begin to say, I feel this way. I think this. I didn't like this. Right? So she said, personalize your statements with I. Use statements that emphasize more on personalized experience rather than general experiences. People, you know how people are. And that is important, that you begin to have a sense of agency. That you feel that, yes, you can express yourself. Yes, you can deal with the situation. She gives an example here. She says, for instance, if you felt insulted when your partner joked about your weight, it's disrespectful when you joke about my weight with our guests. Say something like, I felt so disrespected when you joked about my weight in front of your friends. I felt humiliated. You see the power of that? It lets the other person know what it is that you're feeling. And you also feel like what? You expressed yourself and you address the issue. If you speak in general language and the person doesn't get what you're saying because you're using general language, you may feel like the person is not paying attention to you or respecting you or understands where you're coming from. So she asks, which of the statements has a deeper impact, and yet it, in a nice way, gracefully, right, delivers the message across? And I added on to that. Statements starting with a personalized note like the word I allow your partner to see how hurt you feel. Another point that she talks about is being passive aggressive. We want to resolve conflict, we have to avoid being passive aggressive. And what that means is that we may smile in the person's face, but then we do things that are there to get revenge, or we do things to attack. Or we use language, right, that in reality it seems like it's harmless, but the tone and the energy and everything is aggressive. And she calls that a poison for communication, and it makes things worse. Instead of expressing your anger with words, instead of just saying, I'm angry, I didn't like this, you did something that made me angry, right? You choose behaviors like trying to make one jealous, gossip, pretend they don't exist, or cease communicating with them. That's the passive aggressive tendency. To do things to make the other person jealous, or you gossip, or you pretend like the issues don't exist, or you cut off communication. She says, always speak your mind so that the issue can get resolved as soon as possible without escalating it to another level. Yeah, that's advice overall, in any relationship, but specifically between husband and wife. A lot of partners, they choose to stay quiet, or they use a sarcastic tone instead of just saying, I'm mad at you. So it confuses the partner because there's a mix of messages. There's mixed messages. And the other partner doesn't even know what's going on because they're clueless. She says, you leave the partner in a mix of confusion and cluelessness as to how to move past the silence, because now you cut the partner off. or you use language which is not so clear, what it is that's happening. And usually, to be honest with you, it gets to that point because we have to be careful with this, because then this will be used by some couples. They listen to this and then they'll use it against the other couple. By the time it gets to they use it to go against the other partner. Sorry. By the time it gets to this state in the relationship, it's because there was no listening. And some people, they begin to retreat back because of their experience. They may feel that there's no one there to hear them. So instead of talking openly, they talk in different ways to try not to offend the person. And then it gets to the point where they're so angry that they start doing things to snap back. But that's because they never felt safe to speak in the beginning. That's one scenario. Or they never knew how to communicate themselves. They learned not to communicate themselves, whether in their childhood or in their teenage years, or even in the relationship. They learned how to just disappear. But there's still a breakdown in communication. So using I statements, it begins to help you to communicate properly, and it begins to create balance in the relationship once again. And she says, use suitable language when you're communicating to restore the relationship. Don't use derogatory language during an argument. It won't settle it like that. As a matter of fact, what okay, say it settles it for the moment and the other person gives it. The other person will remember that. The words you choose and the way you deliver them is very important in the fight that you have with your partner. And we have to realize that your words and your body language may say two different things. You see what I'm saying? You ever seen people that in a fight, they start laughing? You know what I'm saying? They're laughing. And that laugh can mean anything. That can be interpreted. Or some people, they're smiling, but in reality, they're talking and they're saying something different while they're smiling.
It's like a friend, Sometimes even a punch, if they punch you can't forget.
Yeah.
But a word can be in your mind for a long time. You don't know how to.
Well, both, because I don't want people to think that physical violence is okay. Yeah. No, but I understand your point. That the words hurt. Yes. Yeah. There was actually, and I mentioned this in the last talk, there was a sheikh in New York. He got criticism recently. This is all recent. Because he was saying that it's better for you to go punch the wall than to say something negative and hurtful to your wife that she won't forget, because it'll destroy her. And some people were saying, well, you're promoting violence. And that was not the case. He was trying to say that when it gets heated to the point of anger, where now it's going to be verbally violent and you're going to say things that are going to destroy the other person, it's better that you go punch the wall and get that out. That's not to say that we're advocating that. We're not advocating to go break things in the house. But the seriousness of that word has to be understood, because we hurt each other really bad with our words. And this is going on in all kind of relationships. It goes on in relationship between husband and wife, friendships. It goes on in the relationships with children and their parents. It goes on in a lot of different relationships. And he also was trying to teach the lesson of the problem of anger, how that anger can escalate to verbal and physical violence. But people were not taking it like that. You see what I'm saying? It's not to say that we encourage violence, or I'm not saying you, but I'm saying him. Well, imagine if those are friends. Sometimes you can cut them off. What are you going to do what are you going to do, husband-wife relationship? You're going to go to divorce? What are you going to do with somebody that insults you? Outside of the argument and inside of the argument. With just words. Let's talk about words in general. she's mentioning the issue of conflict. But if we don't have the habit of talking to each other properly, and we're used to insulting each other anyway, some of our cultures are like that. Some of our cultures, in the Muslim community and even outside the Muslim community, because you have converts that bring their culture in, is based on insults, how we talk to each other. It's based on calling each other names. It's based on reminding people about things, problems, or deficiencies that they have. Or it's based upon criticizing people. That's outside of the argument. We're doing that already on a daily basis. And see, that's what leads and it escalates to when the conflict comes and that insult comes in and you're in that mode when you want to be defensive. You know what I'm saying? You're in that, because we said it last week, that the language at a certain point, and conflict added on to that, puts our brains in war mode. And our brains are programmed to defend us. So for instance, if I see you that you're angry and you're attacking me, then there's a certain chemicals that are released in my body to deal with that issue. That stuff is studied. You understand what I'm saying? For some people, they're going to freeze up. For some people, they're going to run. For other people, they're just going to be on attack mode. But usually in fights, verbal fights, people are going to be ready to be on the attack mode. So if they see you, you know what I'm saying, and you're going back and forth, and you're in that mode where you're going back and forth, like even I'm trying to get that language up with my body and that energy, then you're going to be in that state. The words, we have to realize the power of the word. If I say to you, mashallah, brother, you know what I'm saying? Alhamdulillah, you look, mashallah, look at the blessings. You look good, mashallah. How are you doing? You start to feel a certain way. If I say to you, brother, what's going on with you? How could you come to the masjid with those pants on? You know what I'm saying? Brother, why are you wearing those types of glasses? You know that those glasses are not, you see what I'm saying? Now, all that language is creating a certain energy and relationship. If I don't see you for a long time and I go and I hug you and I say, I love you for Allah, akhi. Like, where have you been, akhi? See what I'm saying? It gives you a certain type of energy. It gives you a certain type of environment. But if I come and I start critiquing you, why are you doing this? Even my language, my physical language, you know what I'm saying? My body language is supporting that. Or I could be smiling to you, but then what I'm saying to you, the body language says one thing, but then how I talk to you is another. That's it. A lot of us don't do that. We don't realize that the body itself tells. There's people that I already feel where they're coming from. I give them the chance to support what it is that they're, to express themselves, because I don't want to misinterpret. But there's people that won't look you in the face when they talk. And I'm not saying like out of respect. I'm saying like they have an issue with you. You know the difference between somebody that's taught respect, not to look at you in the eye or whatever because it's the issue of respect. We know the cultural differences. But the point being is that the body itself gives off energy. The body itself tells. That's why, for instance, in some areas, some professions, they train you, like especially when you go into politics and when you're in the media, they train you to try to control your body language so that your body language matches what it is that you're saying. So we have to realize that when we're fighting with each other, the body language communicates. And here we have to realize that if we're using language which is insulting, it's an issue. You know what I'm saying? It's an issue. So she says, never use derogatory language during an argument as it won't settle it. Right? Even when you're in a heated conversation, and this comes back to the hadith, la taghdab, la taghdab, la taghdab. Don't get, that, in which the Prophet ﷺ is teaching, don't get angry. She says, use appropriate language to express your emotions. Then she says, what this means is this: stay respectful and make sure that your partner doesn't feel disrespected. You're not allowed to name call them, label them. And she said something that I won't mention, but she said, that it's going to come back to haunt you. Even when you think you will lose your mind, if you continue with the debate, choose to refrain from harsh words or cursing, then also yelling is not acceptable at any cost. Now she goes to this section: openly communicate your expectations. That demands that you're speaking clearly, and it takes time to do that, which some people don't have patience with the other. That takes respect. Don't confuse with riddles. And I want to say something here, because she's saying something about the riddles issues. Sometimes people begin not to know how to word choice because they have been in the fight so long. So when they start to communicate, you have to give them a chance, because they've been in the fight so long and they've been used to being quiet so long that when they begin to speak, just being heard, just having the other person listen, you know what I'm saying? For them, they just want to connect at that level. This is, what she's mentioning is very rational. She's expecting everything to be, the author is very organized. It's not like that. When you have to learn how to be open in your communication. You have to learn how to express your expectations. And sometimes if you have a partner that is not giving you attention, doesn't listen to you, doesn't value your opinion, when you do share your opinion, sometimes you're lost and it can become riddles. But with that said, we have to learn how to be clear. If it gets to a level where you can't deal with this anymore and you can't do these things to bring balance in the relationship, when you start saying, I don't want to fight anymore, when you start learning how to balance the relationship by being focused on the present, when you take ownership of what it is that you're saying, when you avoid being passive aggressive, when you use suitable language, when you openly communicate your expectations. If that doesn't work, then you need to get outside support. The issue of sulh. If the issue doesn't reach a fruitful conclusion, she said, you may still be able to have someone intervene. Now, I want to mention this before going to a few points because we're not going to do everything in chapter 3 today, unfortunately. It's because of time. Chapter 3 deals with accepting and sharing opinions. We're going to cover some of it. But before going to chapter 3, I want to say this, that sometimes when you bring outside opinions from other people, you make the situation worse. Why do you think? Why? Do you have a clue?
Because you instead of see the most important thing, what the other person that is important to you, you have to focus on that person.
No. I'm saying we're at the point where we have to get outside help. We're at the point where we need someone else's opinion to help us deal with the situation. Why could that be a problem? Do you have an idea? We'll come back to you. Huh? Say we tried that. We tried that. That's the point that she's getting. Is at a gridlock. We can't move forward anywhere. We're locked. But we're stuck. Yeah. And so now we're trying to get outside help. Why could that be a problem sometimes? No. Why do they shy away? That's the point that I'm saying. That's what I want to get to. Sometimes it could be a problem because it can escalate the issue at another level, or it could be that the people that they get are not going to help them resolve the issues. The people that they get are going to make the problem even worse because they're going to come into the situation aggravating the problem, taking sides, pushing this. What about this? What about that? In the past, you remember he did this in the past? You remember she used to do this? Oh, that's the way they are. You see what I'm saying? They instigate. So the outside help has to be, unless there's an issue of actually reconciling, that's another level now. The outsiders had to be there to help to at least hear you, to clarify. You have to make sure that you put that down, what you want from the outside person.
It's like the story of the Isha, Muhammad, and the father, Abu Bakr, when they fight and they argue and
But that's the reconciliation point. He came to the point of reconciling. We're talking about us knowing what we want from outside help. Do we want an intermediary to reconcile, help us reconcile? Do we want a outside help to have support for the fight? Do we want outside help to help us clarify? We have to be careful with that. We have to know what we want. I'm saying that because I've seen a lot of situations where people get outside help and it compounds the issue. It could be family, could be friends or whatever. That's what I'm saying. At times, yes. Why? Because the professional help, if the professional help is not looking at the whole dynamics, they're just looking at one individual, and they're not keeping the dynamics of the family as a whole. And usually when it comes to like counseling and all of that, they're not, when it comes to counseling, they're going to determine, okay, if you go to, you have to know, family counselor is different than a personal therapist. A family counselor may say, I need to work with you on an individual, but a family counselor is going to be trained to understand dynamics of how the family works. A personal therapist is not necessarily going to come from that angle. A personal therapist is going to come from the angles of just you as a person. That's a personal therapist, let's say, that maybe have the qualifications and license. Some of the counselors are not in that realm. They're trained to counsel and so on and so forth. And I've seen it made worse. Some situations will end in divorce. We're not saying that. You understand? Some situations, just because we say worse, and somebody say, oh yeah, it may lead to divorce. No, some situations, some people need to be divorced.
Testimony that they have. If they have a family that is here,
that's why, but this is the issue. That's why people have to realize dealing with problems like this needs time. And people don't want to put in the time. No, but you could be whoever. It could be even friends that are wise. It could be the old people. It could be the mashaykh. It could be the counselor. But that's the point. Now we reached that you may bring someone in that doesn't have the experience that you need. And that's why you're responsible to know what is it that you need. Do you need to bring clarity? Do you need to bring reconciliation? Or do you just need to come to a point where this needs to end? And that's why you're looking for that support. But you have to be clear. We live in the 21st century. You know what I'm saying? If you know that your family coming in is going to make more of a problem, or if you know that your friends are going to make more of a problem, you have to be clear. We can't just be, we're living life. We have to be serious about life. We can't be just like, I don't know, that type of thing. We have to be clear. What is it that we're doing? That's why studying about marriage, how to better our relationships, how to go to a higher level in the marriage, how to be prepared for the marriage, all of that is important, right? So sometimes the outside help can be a problem. If we reach out for support, we need to know what it is that we're looking for. She says, maybe you need someone to intervene and take over. Sometimes a new perspective can help both partners see the problem from a completely different angle. This is where professional counseling or therapy comes in. Hire a marriage counselor to improve communication, a professional counselor, so on and so forth. But I've seen it. When the couple wants to win the fight, somebody in the couple, they want the counselor to support them. They want the sheikh to support them. They want the family to support them. They're not interested in working out the situation. And that's why I said what I said. She mentioned it about when we go into an argument, we're not going to restore balance if one of us wants to be dominant. That's what I started off with from the book. Don't try to be dominant if you're trying to solve the issue. Dominant means, in this case, to dominate, to be right. So it's the same thing. You're going to drag in the counselor, the family, whoever it is, if you don't have an understanding of how to properly communicate and you don't have an understanding of wanting to bring balance to the relationship. Because if that's what you're being told from the beginning of, okay, you can de-escalate the conflict if you change the way that you are approaching it. You can't continue with that same way and then bring other people in. Because all you're going to do is it clear what I'm saying? You're going to reinforce the same dynamics. You're going to reinforce the same way of being.
Sometimes, people like to have the private life, to be happy, to not involve anything
that works.
and to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and try to find a solution in the Quran.
That the private life works as long as there's no abuse and as long as they can control the situation. That should be part of it anyway. The spiritual side should be part of what you're doing. But if you can't, but this is another thing. When people have, when they feel like there's no control, sometimes that could be damaging because they can say, I'm praying, and there's nothing is happening. I'm asking Allah every day, and Allah is not answering my dua. They start to get like that, especially if it's an abusive situation. How many sisters and brothers, because brothers go through physical violence and abuse and verbal abuse and everything that comes in a relationship as well. Let's not be fools in that regard. But a lot of sisters go into that situation and they pray, and they're in physically and emotionally abusive relationship. And so that can be dangerous when we tell them, just strengthen your iman. You see what I'm saying? No, if it gets to that point where there's those types of violations, you have to get outside help and you have to move out for some time. Or if not, just finish the relationship. Because in some of those situations, in many of those situations, they will not correct themselves. Physical violence is dangerous. Physical violence is a big issue. That doesn't change overnight. Yeah, but we have supported that as societies, as communities, not necessarily as religion, but we have supported it across the board. That's why it's gone to the other extreme, where everything is so sensitive. We're at the other extreme now. But the same thing happens with men. I know cases in which brothers, they've been hit with frying pans when they're in the bed. Scratched up, beat up, pounded on, all kind of stuff like that. And it's across cultures. It's not one culture, Habibi. It's not one culture. And we're not singling out communities and cultures. You understand what I'm saying? My experience on a personal level, I've dealt with the Desi community. I've dealt with the Arab community. I've dealt with the European American community, with the Latino community, with the African American community. And the violence is across the board. Verbal violence and physical violence. That's where we're at. And the ones who are successful are the ones who realize that they have to value each other and realize that they have to, and that's what she brings up here. Yani ثقافة الشورى وتطبيق قواعد الشورى, the culture of shura, consultation, and implementing the principles of consultation, which this is a Quranic concept. This is what resolves the issue. Because in order to get to the point of shura, consultation, which is a Quranic mandate, how we govern our affairs, it's not just on the level of the government. Most is at the level of the family. The Quran commands us, شَوَّرَهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ أَمْرُهُمْ شُورَ بَيْنَهُمْ. And there's two different levels. First, the Quran described the believers as أَمْرُهُمْ شُورَ بَيْنَهُمْ, that there are people that consult each other, and when that was not implemented, then the Quran commanded شَوَّرَهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. It's not the opposite, it's not the other way around. So it's a mandate, it's an obligation. And we see that in today's time when everybody wants an opinion, even the children, the same thing. And I've mentioned that when I first came to this community. I'm talking in general in this class, but in this community, one of the first things that I did as far as a khutbah, was I talked about how Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala consulted the angels with the creation of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. And some of the ulama, not all of them, said that if Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one has no equal, no partner, no need, subhanahu wa ta'ala, walhamd lahu, if Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala can ask the angels or inform the angels as to what they're doing and listen to their opinions, subhanahu wa ta'ala, then what about us that we're nowhere in comparison to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala? And we're commanded to shura. So the issue of one person being in charge and the other person not being in charge, that doesn't work. Because even for anything to be successful, look at Amazon.com, even though I don't like Amazon 100%, but Amazon.com is successful in a lot of things. One of the things that they did is that they had to look at every tier of the business to see the input of every tier of worker. The same thing with Toyota. Toyota, one of the things that made them successful, their business model, was that they were able to share the opinions of all of the workers. In Amazon, they actually would make people go to different areas and departments to learn what was going on when we talk about the leadership. And so if we see that in the dunya, that sharing opinions and sharing information is important, then what about in the family? What about the fact that the Quran tells us that doesn't, and there's two types of shura, to simplify. And I actually had brought this book to tell the people, this one is by Dr. Ahmed Raisoon. It's shura, the Quranic principle of consultation. It's a study. This is where the Muslims are lacking. This is all on the study of the concept of shura based on the Quran and the Sunnah and statements of the ulama. And there's other books. Unfortunately, many of them are in Arabic. There's one that we're studying right now at Manara. It's 2 volumes. It was written over 50 years. 50 years of trying to understand the concept of shura so that as an ummah we can go back to it. You understand what I'm saying? Because in the household, when you don't value the opinion, especially husband and wife, when they don't value each other in their opinions, they don't consult each other in decision making. There's 2 things here. That we take each other's opinion to make a decision together. And then there's where we take each other's opinion to understand. What do you think about this? See what I'm saying? That's different than taking each other's opinion to make a decision together. And we have to know which one we're doing. Are we doing al-istishara or are we doing actual shura, which is consultation? And then when is it that when we conclude it together, when is it that opinion is the opinion that stands in the household? And there's certain things like raising the children, like economics, a lot of different things. That opinion, that is something that we're lacking, especially in today's time in our households. The issue of how to organize ourselves in decision making and taking opinions. That's why there's fights. And a lot of couples are confused upon this issue. A lot of couples are confused upon this issue because the education level between husband and wife may be at a similar level. So there's impossible. You have some brothers that they're masters at businesses, but in other things they don't know, and the wife knows. There's inequality there. So how do you come and you make a decision? You have some brothers that they have degrees, and the wife, she has a degree, and she's extremely intelligent as well. So how do you make that work? You have, in some families, you have both the husband and wife works. Both of them have degrees. Both of them have position in society. You understand what I'm saying? So you think that a wife she's working in the hospital, in administration, and she has a background. You think that she's going to function at the same level as a wife that's just at home and all her concern is just what's going on in the household? She's not concerned with paying the bills. She's not concerned with, she just wants to focus on the kids. And not to say that they're less. They're not less. It's just the mindset is different. So the issue of taking and giving opinions, we have to learn how to do that in an Islamic framework and decision making together, because it has become a competition, and tradition is another issue. Custom comes into that. So the more that we don't pay attention to that, the more it becomes a war between husband and wife. What I'm saying clear or no? It's not clear. It's clear or no? And she a lot of what she's saying is very Quranic, but it's not enough. What she says is not enough. It's just an introduction. We have to learn the issue of shura. And she mentions things that are very important. She says some people, when they start, and she says dating, of course, because she's not Muslim, but let's say that they're beginning to know each other with the intention for marriage, because that's how we do it, with the intention. They think that having differences of opinion about politics, religion, values, or what's right and wrong, they will always be fighting over the same thing. That's not true. It only becomes a problem when both parties refuse to take into account each other's point of view. And we read that from Imam Shafi'i, that certain things hold us together, right? We can have positions in which we differ with each other, but it doesn't mean that we have to destroy our relationship over it. So I'm gonna close with saying this: having a different opinion does indeed complicate things slightly in a relationship, but there are many ways of dealing with it, right? And so for starters, we have to understand each other's background, where we're coming from, how we're raised, what neighborhood we came from, the differences in culture, because we can come all from the same culture. We can all be Puerto Rican, but from different places. We can all be Colombian from different places, Palestinians or Moroccans, but this one is from by the ocean, and this one is in a village, and the other one is in the capital. This one had a big family, this one didn't. We have to understand what shapes us. And she says, lastly, nearly all major decisions are taken mutually after thorough discussions. And I'll end with that. We'll continue next week. She said, understand the background where the person has come from, not only in their culture background, but in their family background, and also in their educational background, also what happened during the day, so that we can understand where people are coming from. Then when it comes to the issue of making decisions, we have to understand that major decisions require discussions that are thorough, that we're clear. If we're having problems on the fighting front and the communication front, when it comes to this issue of accepting and giving opinions and making decisions, we're going to basically be in a disaster. It's impossible that we can govern the family relationships properly if we can't go through arguments, if we can't listen, if we can't consider each other. It's impossible. That's why everything that came before in this book is essential for coming to this point, because now we're moving out of conflict. Now we're moving on the issue of healthy relationships. So we leave with the issue of the importance of shura. We'll regain, or if Allah wa ta'ala allows, we'll regroup next week, inshallah. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Astaghfirullah.